Member for Defence and member for Riverina.
It's always good to follow the member for Hinkler, the Assistant Minister to the Deputy Prime Minister, and I listened closely to his contribution. I tell you what, it was a lot better than the member for Hunter's effort earlier on in this debate. And I heard the member for Hinkler say quite clearly that for every dollar of R&D research and development levy money spent, $13 goes back to the farmer and $30 goes back to the wider community. And he's so right. R&D is so important, and that is why the Primary Industries Levies and Charges Collection Amendment Bill 2016 is also crucial to be passed by this parliament. This bill amends the Primary Industries Levies and Charges Collection Act 1991 to allow for the distribution of levy payer information to rural research and development corporations, RDCs, for the development of levy payer registers. And as I listened carefully to the member for Hinkler, I also, sitting in my office just a short while ago, listened very, very carefully to the member for Hunter, the so-called Shadow Minister for Agriculture, who rubbished the decentralisation, Deputy Speaker, of research and development organisations to regional areas. He ought to be sticking up for regional areas. He ought to be advocating for decentralisation. He is one of those members of the so-called, alleged country Labor members. And you would think he would come into this place and be talking up decentralisation, talking up the relocation of RDCs to rural and regional areas. I have to say that Wagga Wagga, my hometown, is the beneficiary of one of these very decentralised projects. Wagga Wagga, on 10 February this year, was announced as the new home of a dozen jobs in the core function of the Rural Industries Research and Development Corporation, RIDIC, in a shake-up announced by the Coalition, by the federal government. I welcome the announcement. It delivers upon the Nationals. I did member for Wakefield. Of course I did. I mean, it's jobs. And you stick up for jobs in your electorate, as you should, as I do. Any jobs. And when it was announced, it was a dozen jobs. That might not mean much, but I tell you what, it's 12 large pay packets. It's 12 professionals. And when 12 professionals of that ilk move into a city the size of Wagga Wagga, admittedly it's 66,000 people, it's a good-sized city, but when they do, they bring not just 12 large pay packets. Quite often they bring 2 or 3 kids to go into the Catholic or public schools. They also bring. They also then end up getting involved in school parents and friends, parents and citizens associations. They get involved in local Rotary, Lions clubs, sporting groups. They contribute so much to our community. But not only was it a dozen jobs, member for Wakefield, but on the 5th of March it became 21 jobs, because there were 9 additional jobs with that particular RIDIC. 21 jobs in total. And they will provide a very much a welcome boost to not just Wagga Wagga but the wider Riverina region. And everyone in this place ought to know, because I've talked about it often enough. Goodness knows I know the member for Barker has heard me say it often enough, that our region is a proud and productive agricultural hub. And this commitment by the Coalition government, by the Nationals in government, builds upon the region's leading agriculture research at places such as Charles Sturt University. What a marvellous institution that is, as well as ensuring that more government agencies are on the ground in the regions and closer to the places where our food and fibre is grown, closer to the places where our food and fibre is produced, and certainly when it comes to food and fibre, the Riverina is a leader. Decentralisation isn't just an abstract idea, Deputy Speaker. It's a real priority for this government. It's a real significant priority for the Nationals in government. And the 10 February announcement is living proof of our election commitment being put into action. And I say 10 February, of course that was a dozen jobs. We talk about March 5, we talk about an additional 9 jobs, 21 in total. Now, the formerly Canberra-based RIDIC is going to increase its regional presence. When I say formally based, they'll still have a presence in Canberra. They'll still have a presence in Canberra, in the nation's capital, but they'll now be extending that to boost jobs and opportunities and prosperity in places such as Wagga Wagga, Dubbo, in the member for Parkes' electorate, what a wonderful representative he is, in Toowoomba, and the member for Groom's electorate, and in other areas. These RDCs are focused on rural research, including grains, fisheries, aquaculture, small and emerging industries, taking advantage, Deputy Speaker, of that innovation and science agenda that this government is fostering, that this government is enhancing, that this government is making a significant financial contribution to. So it just makes good sense to locate them away from Canberra, where the boots actually hit the dirt in their respective sectors. So I'm very, very pleased that 21 jobs are coming Wagga Wagga's way. But I listened carefully, as I said, to the member for Hunter's contribution. I didn't hear him talk about foreign investment. Foreign investment's good. Made this country great. Continues to make this country prosper. But it has to be in the national interest. Has to be in the national interest. And I have to say, Deputy Speaker, when Labor has a policy to have $1,000 million being the trigger point at which the Foreign Investment Review Board would look into the foreign takeover of an agribusiness or farmland, I worry. The people I serve worry. The people I represent worry. I do worry about that member for Wakefield, and you should too, because we do not need foreign takeovers that decide that the price of our wheat or our rice is going to be in a boardroom in, for argument's sake, Illinois, in the United States of America. We need to have control over our agribusinesses right here in Australia. Sure, foreign capital is welcomed. It always has been. It's made, as I say, this country great. But when the Labor Party has a foreign investment takeover policy that doesn't even offer a trigger to FIRB until it actually passes the $1 billion mark, I worry. I know a lot of the listeners to this speech out there on their tractors working hard. I know that a lot of them in the shearing sheds who listen to Parliament, and they do, working hard. I know that a lot of people who will be reading this on Hansard are concerned about that, as they ought to be. Now, our government, despite what the member for Hunter might argue, and he's very anti-nationals. I can't understand why he should be getting on board with some of the policies if he was a fair income country representative. If he was fair income about agriculture, he should actually be endorsing, not rubbishing, many of the policies, indeed all of the policies that the Nationals bring to the table. And you know, we have produced many achievements in just 2.5 years of being in government, abolishing the carbon tax, abolishing the mining tax, those job-destroying taxes, those regional Australia-destroying taxes, signed preferential trade agreements with South Korea, Japan, with our largest trading partner, China. Very, very important. Unlocking the logjam of Commonwealth environmental laws, impeding rural and remote and regional growth, a drought support package, comprehensive package, supporting those farmers who, particularly in northwest New South Wales and Queensland areas which haven't seen rain for a considerable amount of time, recommenced the live export of sheep and cattle and goats to such countries as Bahrain, Iran and Egypt, while rebuilding the live cattle trade with Indonesia. And wasn't that a disaster? Wasn't that an absolute diplomatic disaster, an economic disaster? Honestly, to do that over just a television program was an absolute disgrace and one of the worst decisions that many people have seen, not just me saying it, but many people have seen that this parliament perpetrated on the hard-working cattle producers of this country. The National Stronger Regions Fund already is rolling out money to regional Australia, Roads to Recovery program to enable the food and the fibre to be taken from those regional areas to export markets. I didn't hear the member for Hunter talking much about those. $565 million in our first year alone to black spots on roads. And when I talk about black spots, I can also refer to the significant amount of money, tens of millions of dollars being spent on mobile black spots. Not 1 cent was spent during the 6 sorry years of Labor on mobile black spots. Bridges renewal program. So glad that in my electorate we're finally funding, and I say finally because Margaret Merrilou is a councillor, a wonderful local government representative for the Murrumbidgee Shire, had fought hard for a new bridge over the Murrumbidgee at Carrathul for many, many years, decades in fact, and finally this government, in conjunction with Duncan Gay and his New South Wales coalition government, are funding that bridge. And at Gabarralong in Gundagai Shire, another new bridge. And just recently I was announced funding for Unoni Bridge, which is a vital linkage to the Bowman industrial area at Wagga Wagga City Council. All important linkages, all providing valuable or eliminating road network pinch points. I could also talk about the Kapooka Bridge, $27.5 million provided by this side of government. All important. They're linking in with primary industries research and development, so significant. Hundreds of millions of dollars for the heavy vehicle safety projects. Biosecurity. The 2014 budget, I hear those so often condemning the 2014 budget, but it contained $100 million for rural research and development, $15 million to support market access and $20 million extra money for biosecurity. Biosecurity that I have to say under Labor was ignored. I made a trip to New Zealand, a self-funded trip, mind you, to ensure that the potential apple blight did not come across from New Zealand apples onto those fine orchards of Batlow, Deputy Speaker. And when the Asian bee incursion threatened our fine honey producers, what did Labor do? Nothing. Absolutely diddly squat. Didn't care, didn't know, didn't want to know. And I was very pleased to take part in the turning of the soil at Mickleham. In the member for McEwen's electorate, he was there too. I have to give him credit. He was there too, and he was a supporter of the post-entry biosecurity facility just near the Melbourne airport. So they're the sorts of things that our government is getting on and doing in the R&D space, in rural Australia. The Northern Australia push has been complemented by certainly this government looking after Southern Australia. And just recently, last August, farmers and irrigators in my area were told that they were going to share in $263.5 million for on-farm irrigation in New South Wales, and particularly around the Collyambly area. I had the Chief Executive Officer of Snowy Hydro, Paul Broad, a former guru with Infrastructure New South Wales, in my office this morning, and he was praising the work that they do, the fact that every single drop of water at Collyambly they account for. They know where it is. They know how it's being dripped out onto those wonderful rice paddies, onto those marvellous cotton crops, over the vegetables that they grow in the huge paddocks, their supplies to many wholesalers, many supermarkets. It all comes about through R&D. It all comes about because this government is prepared to spend money on infrastructure, on research and development, on making sure that every drop is accounted for. Not like those opposite. All they wanted to do was make sure that every drop of water flowed down the rivers, flowed down the system, flowed down the Murray-Darling Basin and out of the mouth of the Murray. That's all they cared about. That's all they cared about, Deputy Speaker. I hear the member for South Australia opposite. I tell you what, they forget. They do forget that our areas are fine producing areas. And I know he originally comes from an irrigation area, and I know he knows of the importance that irrigation irrigation communities, those farmers who provide the food and fibre that keeps this nation great. I know he knows the importance of them, and it's also important that we have water reform. We are doing that, but it's also equally as important that this primary industries levies bill passes this House, as it will. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the Assistant Minister.